Hello. Welcome back. It's another beautiful day here at Pyramid Lake. My name is Eric Michael, and for those of you who are just joining me, I am here to share a most beautiful, wonderful, splendid, magical, tragic story. If you haven't already checked out the prologue, I highly suggest doing that first. I'm not a literary scholar by any means, or nor do I hold a degree in books. But from my understanding, the prologue sets up the rest of the story. You know, the prologue eases your way into the rest of the story. It makes it easier to make sense of the rest of the story. And take it from me, Icarus's story has a hard enough time making sense as it is. You know, so all the more sense the better. So please, if you haven't already checked out the prologue, go on and do that. Because this is chapter 1. What we are going into today is chapter 1. And before we get into that, I feel that I must forewarn everyone of the intensity of this story. As beautiful and magical and wonderful and splendid and all that good stuff that this story is, I can assure you that at times it is equal parts horrifying, grotesque, gruesome, a bit violent, a bit harrowing. But Icarus does have a very strange way of making tragic things comedic and terrifying things beautiful and sad things loving. And that's what we are here on this voyage to do. We are here to make bad things good, sad things happy, fearful things loving. And that's not always easy. We live in a cruel, cruel world. Sad, sad times. And it is important to appreciate those sad times, to appreciate those cruel aspects, so that we can make light of them. We can better understand them. And that's what this story will help people do. Not only better understand the world, but better understand themselves. With that being said, I think we should get into today's sponsor. This video is brought to you by Don't Be Afraid of Words. Don't be afraid of words. You know, in our society today, we're a very trigger warning people. Lots of people out there in the world today need trigger warnings because they do not want to hear something that triggers them. They have very sensitive ears. They have very sensitive eyes. They need to look away. They need to put their earmuffs on. Everything comes with a trigger warning. I don't much care for trigger warnings. I feel that they just get in the way of things, you know? First, trigger warning is just a gateway drug to other things like changing words. First comes a trigger warning, then all of a sudden you are changing the dictionary. You are saying, we need to change hard words. We need to change hard words to be less hard so that I can hear them and not be so triggered. Words carry impact. They have weight to them. And while there are some words that people do not want to hear, that does not mean they need to be changed. If anything, they need to be faced. They need to be conquered. You need to conquer your fear of words. Because having a fear of words is a very silly little speed bump in life. There are much greater fears to have in life. I, for one, am terrified of tarantulas. And there are so many tarantulas out here. But I am working to overcome that fear. And I guarantee you that if you have a fear of words, that if you must have trigger warnings, if you were to overcome that silly little speed bump fear, I guarantee you will just skyrocket yourself into overcoming much bigger fears. I will not be jeopardizing the integrity of Icarus's story in order to accommodate the more sensitive, trigger warning, word-changing society that we live in. If you are an irrefutably soft plush toy of a human, perhaps this story is not for you. Perhaps there is a Minecraft video out there that is more suited for your liking. I recently have discovered this thing called mukbang. And from what I gather, it is just morbidly obese people slurping noodles. And there's a huge audience for watching people slurp noodles. It's not for me. I don't much care for it. I think that is gross. And while there are aspects of this story that are certainly gross, I would rather indulge in that than watch people slurp noodles. It doesn't matter. Perhaps this video is not for you. But if you are afraid of words, afraid of other things, perhaps this story is for you. Perhaps it will allow you to overcome fears. Perhaps you suffer from past trauma. Perhaps you are someone who represses past trauma. You do not want to do that. That will only lead to more chaotic, violent, mental anguish. You need to face these things. And Icarus, you could say he was born and bred into agonizing trauma. Having suffered his entire life, growing to understand trauma. It certainly sucks, but virtually everything under the umbrella of trauma, Icarus has experienced. And perhaps you are someone who has suffered trauma. Perhaps you are someone who needs direction in navigating trauma. Perhaps you are not someone who has suffered trauma. Perhaps you are someone who would like to lend a more empathetic ear to understanding what people go through in terms of trauma. In a nutshell, Icarus's story is of love triumphing over trauma. And that is beautiful. That is oftentimes tragic, sad, desolate. But We are here to be hopeful in progressing onward, in venturing into the abyssal black of our fears, of our pains, to conquer them with love, with forgiveness, with compassion. So yeah, today's sponsor, do not be afraid of words. Do not be afraid of words. You're better than that. You're stronger than that. Trigger warnings. This is your trigger warning. But it is important to know that if you come across these words, another reason I'm not going to be giving trigger warnings is because if you decide, I don't want to listen to that. I don't want to listen to that. You are skipping over a fear. You are skipping over a fear. You are skipping a part of the story. The story is now in shambles. Your fears are now in shambles. You need to conquer each fear one step at a time to be triumphant. Do not skip over a fear. Do not skip over a word. Do not skip over things you are perhaps neglecting within yourself. Let's read, shall we? Yes, another most beautiful chapter of The Stars Above. Chapter 1, Pink Tiled Tub. Depression in a man spreads like rot, an emotional disease which infects at incomprehensible rates of consumption, feeding on the last bits of will believed to remain. Submissive isolation, rapid deterioration, total desolation. Darkness falls on the damned, color fades to black. Free falls to bottomless rock bottoms. Suffocation at one's own willful hands. Desperate gasps for air devoid of oxygen. A purgatory of paranoia. An endless expanse of which hell knows no bounds and ironclad chains wrap tighter with each step. 2 forward, I'll find my way out. 20 back. The pain's too great, the burden unrelenting. Failure to oneself, failure to those loved, utter abandonment. Nothing, no one remains, forsaken, perished to ruin. Happiness, an ever-distant, fleeting memory of what hope once was. Hope, a gentle whisper of sudden and brief mania until thought returns to usher it away. Thought, the only way left to live free of feeling, is to die. I've made the unfortunate choice to run from most things in life, having fled the likes of love and sorrow, purpose and regret, humility and arrogance. Every time excuses were made as to why such a coward's route was taken, but it was always for the same unspoken reason. My fears had only been truths I was unwilling to admit. Too hurt for the pain held and too weak for the weight carried. A sad reality for the heart consumed by its own neglect. The hamster wheel perpetuating a vicious cycle only spins for we turn it. And when we've been running it the entirety of our life, we've done no less than become the wheel itself. Once earning our misery, we either make the conscious choice to grow from it or sulk in it. There's no in between. But every day we wake presents another chance at redemption. to become better than what once was. However, we must be willing to accept, attest, and forgive ourselves with absolution. I'd argue it was only in my choices to run that I'd discover all it was I wished to escape. A love buried and pain embodied. We all have our skeletons, and it's only ever a matter of time before their pursuit leaves us too tired to press on without turning back to face them. Try as we may, there's no distance great enough to flee, no place dark enough to hide, and we will never truly forget. Ever since adolescence, I felt brought here to share a story which could help the world. But the older I got, the less desire remained in me for anyone to hear it, and the harder it became in finding a reason to tell it. There were times when I believed capable, having moved cities to write, ended relationships to write, even sacrificed living to write. The emotions flowed like a raging whitewater river, yet I never wrote. And having run for so long, it seemed to have become a story no longer remembered. In January of 2018, my mother passed, having lost the only anchor to a life plagued by anguish. Knowing no other path, I'd turned to run once more, only now, for the last time. In April, I threw everything to my name in the back of a box truck and set my heading north, up Interstate 395 with Monkey at my side, never looking back. We'd land on the very edge of Reno's rotting heart, a place welcome to spiraling demise. I'd finally felt the pain strong enough to bring pen to paper, but all had been forgotten. However, in that small town destined to arrive, I'd find the two who'd help me remember, the two who set me free. I'd grown accustomed to slums, but East 4th Street, Reno's #1 tourist attraction for cheap thrills, worse drugs, and a poor fuck, made those places look like Beverly Hills. "Look, Monkey, we're home!" I yelled as we pulled into the dirt driveway of our dilapidated residence, an old and decrepit salmon-colored motel, masquerading as a renovated studio complex on the verge of collapse. There were 9 units and the 8th was ours. The number plaque was missing a nail, so I turned it to form the infinity symbol for a good makeshift omen. When starved of positive affirmations over the course of a lifetime, one learns to feast on nutrient-rich silver linings. That moment was short-lived once opening the door to a hobbit-sized dwelling not even the ever-modest Samwise Gamgee could stomach appreciation for. There was a pungent waft of decay which crept up each nostril. Cheap vinyl flooring ran the room, all 100 square feet of it. The walls were asylum white, not eggshell, slipper satin, or chantilly lace. No, asylum white. A reminder of the sanity lost having wound up there. I lit a cigarette as the talons of something fierce clawed at my insides, reaching from rock bottom to drag me under. Intangible thoughts raced like a stray psychotic on the brink of an episode. My bed can barely fit into this shithole. Where will my dresser go? I have 12 jackets, 5 coats, 20 vests, 6 hats, 15 day button-downs, and 16 night button-downs. Where will they all hang without getting wrinkled? What the hell am I doing? Why am I even fucking here? There were no answers. Only the burning reminder of each rollie, anxiously smoked to the butt, singeing my fingers in a daze. After fighting off a mental breakdown and mustering the courage to reevaluate my Tetris-based situation, I walked in. There was a children's play toy kitchenette with an easy-bake oven comparable to Hasbro, a small refrigerator, a sink too shallow for doing dishes in, and a satin window with no visibility. That is, unless open to the back dumpster which housed some vagrant and his spring-torn mattress littered with needles. To no surprise, there was an air conditioner of which was ripped from said window and left broken on the floor. The closet-sized bathroom had a small prison mirror with no medicine cabinet, which hung crooked over a tiny toilet. Its saving grace was an adorable, curtainless tub with pink-chipped tiles that ran up the wall. That's where the dishes were done, amongst other sad and inescapable things. My first restless night was spent tossing and turning in angst, waking the next morning lost and out of touch. The sun pierced through broken blinds, and an obnoxious horn was blaring across the street, signaling work at the stone mill. Everything felt wrong. I rose to strange noises, strange light, in a strange town, under a strange roof, on top of a strange bed. In that dwelling, it felt more like a mattress you'd keel onto drunk with a cigarette in hand, only to never wake, for you've burnt the whole goddamn joint to the ground. I crawled from bed and across the floor of crap piled to the ceiling. Feng Shui was all types of distorted, the room appearing like a junkyard zoo for beastly mongrels and ranchy raccoons. The day began with a cup of black coffee, burnt toast, and 3 carelessly rolled cigarettes. I used to find that by drinking bitter, eating bitter, and smoking bitter, when bitter situations, or people, inevitably arise, they'd be met with due preparation. I kicked back half naked on the porch with a chair found by the dumpster, nodding to each passerby giving befuddled looks. The room faced east, and as the blood-red sun rose behind dust of the stone mill, up and over the valley of Truckee Meadows, I couldn't help but think with such brilliant clarity, it's remarkable how fucked I am. Unit 7 was unoccupied. Where am I? Unit 7 was unoccupied, thankfully, considering that was the shared paper-thin wall of which my CD player sat against. The charismatic occupants of Unit 9 would arrive later that afternoon, when a large van pulled alongside the building. Out of that clown car magically poured 15 joyfully chirping Mexicans who hadn't known a lick of English. By high noon, I'd become an expert at the Northern Nevada nod, exchanging the gesture with each of them. Their unit appeared twice the size of mine. Surely the motel's honeymoon suite, minus the heart-shaped tub, and bunk beds sprawled each wall like Lincoln logs. Our unspoken meetings occurred each day as they came back from work, until a Friday I'd break bread with offerings of tequila, a 30 rack of cerveza, and 3 pounds of carne asada. We got pissed drunk that night, ate tacos, and danced for hours to mariachi music. I felt like the belle of the ball at her most extravagant quinceañera. It was wonderful, considering my first quinceañera was a total downer. We laughed, sang, and shared in good drink. No language barrier could ever prevent such sense of camaraderie. Amigos, I said, you are my new best friends. ¿Dónde están las chicas? Chico Blanco, they'd scream. ¿Te gusta la jaina? Muy caliente. I worked construction in my mid-20s, having picked up on enough Spanish to know that they worked the fields each spring through fall, while providing for their families down south in Mexico. That back-breaking labor no one wants to do, but that they'd been willing to wake every day before dawn, suffering through the brutal hours and desert sun, just to provide an honest chance for those they love. To have called my new friends admirable in their endeavors would be unjustly downplaying their righteous ethic. I'd been in a down-and-out state of self-disgust, but those men gave me a hope of sorts, albeit short-lived. While there may have been bright spots on cloudy days, this time was dark and my mind fragmented. I'd lived a life of intolerable agony, but my mother's passing left me ill-prepared in facing such now. Alas, so began a rapid descent into an obliterating madness. In the first couple weeks of living there, the most deplorable parts of my undoing were revealed. Not a waking moment passed where I hadn't wished to end the pain and take my own life. However, the torment it would cost those closest plagued me with guilt. Who would come to identify my remains? Would my brother be shown the pictures taken of me lying lifeless in a pool of blood? What would it do to him and our already broken family? These questions haunted me to the deep dark corners of a soul beaten into submission. What if it made it look like an accident? I'd wonder. If having stepped in front of a passing bus, surely it wouldn't have been my fault. Just another heartbreaking notch on the belt of our family's curse. They'd overcome it. We always have. These were the desperate moments of rampant contemplation, spent wasting away in that grime-encrusted, pink-tiled tub. A hopeless space shared alongside an orange bottle of pills and silver razor of which I'd envisioned driving up each wrist every godforsaken night. It's sadistic to say, but there was a slight comfort in romanticizing the thought of dying in such a distasteful slum, while ending it all to the woeful tunes of grunge rock, like sad poetry in motion. Monkey would spend those nights sitting on the sink, looking down at me with longing eyes of despair. No pity for a man in ruins, only despair. "Don't give me that fucking look, Monkey," I said, "as if you know what it's like or how it feels. What's a kite without its tail, a balloon without its string, or a monkey without his surfboard? Meet my eyes and watch the shifting faces of mediocrity through the cracks and cogs of an insufferable existence. This is the day of reckoning, brought forth by ruination at my own hands. Here I lay to pray, a disciple of dismay, born into a world of cold and gray. I know nothing but pain. I feel nothing but pain. I bring nothing but pain. And what's it all come to? Where's it led? Tell me as I sink further into this bottomless pit, smoking on each bugler-wrapped coffin nail, you self-righteous son of a bitch! You should have been buried in the salt flats of Death Valley when I had the chance. But you know just as well, we needed each other more than anything. Don't you remember? You practically begged for this life. So, choke it down. I used to despise the fact that my mother had suicidal tendencies. The knowledge of her sad attempts filled me with such unforgiving resent and anger. How could you be so fucking selfish? I'd ask in rage. Have you no sense in what that would do to your children? Do you even love us at all? She'd plead for help and I'd belittle her, having no sense towards what she was going through, being selfish enough to dismiss it. The sad and hard to admit truth of it is, when you found yourself in a place of absolute defeat, and that depression begins to spread like rot, the consequences of those dire actions made are not taken into consideration. And as for those you leave behind, no matter their love, it isn't believed enough to be saved. It wasn't until stepping onto that same ledge while peering down the steep cliff of an abysmal choice that I'd finally come to understand it for myself. Those who've never truly suffered its contemplation tend to refer to suicide as a coward's way out, but that statement couldn't be further from the truth. It's awful to say, but to take your own life requires a phenomenal amount of courage unbeknownst to most. It may be more heroic to live life with fortitude, but it requires an even greater sense of fearlessness to end it. I believe a good majority of people, whether they wish to admit it or not, are in a perpetual state of pain, be it physical, mental, or emotional. Most don't even realize this, for it's become normality, and being an asshole, second nature. I'm a prime example, yet won't go without admitting struggles faced while trying to be a decent and just prick. After all, the furthest reaches of hope come from the deepest parts of the darkest places, and we must choose to grasp for them. After crawling from the depths of that pink-tiled tub each night, I'd stand before the mirror wondering who it was looking back at me. There wasn't a bone to pick with God, but myself and the demons in desperate need of exercise. I'd clench each end of the sink as if holding on for dear life, wanting to scream and cry, pleading for release. My chest would rise and fall, but there was never any air to breathe. We needn't be a corpse to feel lifeless. I was 24 when the victim of a horrific accident passed with his hands in mine. And what was remembered most in that moment were his eyes. They belonged to a man who'd seen his own death, holding glimpses of reflection upon the entirety of one's life. The look was not of panic or terror, but acceptance and understanding. So, without speaking, I held that gaze, assuring that in his final moments he'd known he wasn't alone. Questions raced through my mind, all revolving around him. Who was he before now? Was he good, honest, and just? Was he a loving husband to his wife and caring father to his children? Had he felt whole and content, having lived purposely? What memories were shared, fears felt, and love stoked within up until that last moment? Those final seconds of which he clenched his hand just a bit tighter in mine before perishing into that great, endless night. In kneeling before him, I came to understand how the eyes are a window to our soul, for while his hadn't shut, I could see them closing. A gaze that just seconds prior had found peace became empty and haunting. Looking into them as he passed, I felt some part of the life resting in my eyes had been taken with him, and that some part of his would remain carried within mine. The questions asked at his side were very similar to those now posed, gazing into the furthest reaches of my reflection with eyes of emptiness. Who was it looking back at me? Was he prepared to die and encounter the tribulations of his own existence? What purpose has he? What must be done to surrender the suffering which has followed him for so long? Is he even meant for this life? If so, what are the teachings of its torture? If only I'd remembered, it wasn't the abolishment of pain which led to salvation. Deliverance lie in its acceptance and transmutation. We mustn't fear to peer through the looking glass, for it's our only true path in traversing the final frontier. Great secrets of the unknown lie solely within us. However, seeking answers of which being terrified to receive plunge me into very twisted states of awareness, like bad trips on a strong drug. There will always be others out there who've had it worse, but I've seen horrors no one should bear witness to, and nothing frightened me more than unequivocally lifting the veil to meet the eyes of myself. I'd faced the fears of man, those dominant in the physical, having overcome pain and violence. I'd bandaged wounds of the body, but had I healed each tear which followed, or those screams still echoing from the depths of my being? While having faced the fears of man, those of man's soul were neglected. I'd ask many questions before that mirror, but only 3 would present the door for liberation, none of which were posed. What rests beneath the pain we hope to tend? What burrows between those wounds we seek to mend? And what forgiveness stems from their root's end? It's truly comical. When fallen on hard times, all we want is to be free of them. We curse the skies we struggle so relentlessly to cope beneath, begging a goddamn bone be thrown our way. We'll do just about anything to deflect and project each problem to arise, laying blame on those around us, our jobs, upbringings, or sad circumstances. But pointing a finger to any one of those excuses is only out of petty desperation. Deflection is the best way to avoid our own reflection. The thing about those hard times we long to free ourselves from is that they're the same trials working so earnestly in our favor to teach us the virtues of life. We turn our back on these golden opportunities of which lead us to much deeper insights of self, our strength of will, patience, humility, courage, compassion, love, and forgiveness. Unconditional understandings that are only brought forth by hard times. And the harder we work to run, the more difficult those lessons become to grasp. If only wisdom was held to appreciate them for what they are in the moment, we wouldn't have to come to terms with their twisted punchline of a sick joke years later, when felt it's too late to make amends, whether with ourselves or another. Hindsight really is an atrocious bitch who happens to go entirely unrecognizable in a pink tiled tub. Holy moly, that chapter is... Talk about a doozy. I myself prefer clawfoot tubs from the Victorian era. Clawfoot tubs from the Victorian era were so very beautiful. Porcelain white with little dragon claw feet, which raised you up off the ground. The kind of tub you draw a bath in and pour a glass of red wine and light some candles and recite poetry. Yes, I'm a man of Victorian era clawfoot tubs. I do not, I would not even want to come close to that pink tiled tub. It sounds hopeless, wretched, terrifying, desolate, lonely, apathetic. I could probably go on and on with all the words that would describe why I do not want to even look at that pink chipped tiled tub. But it was important to face that pink tiled tub, to overcome fear, to recognize sorrow, to transmute the pain. Shout out to today's sponsor, Do Not Be Afraid of Words. If you are someone that was perhaps afraid, slightly afraid, moderately afraid, deathly afraid of words, and you made it through that chapter, congratulations. You are now on your way to overcoming even greater fears. I appreciate you sticking around and not clicking off the video so that you could go watch some behemoth slurp noodles. I appreciate you sticking around. You do not need to go watch people slurp noodles. That is doing nothing for you. I do not know who watches those videos, but I do not watch them. They're gross. Perhaps I will get into mukbang at some point. Just because it's so gross. And I want in on that insufferable action. Doesn't matter. Thank you so much for joining me. That was such a remarkably beautiful and tragic chapter of The Stars Above. I can't wait until next time. How exciting this has been. It is a beautiful day. I'm gonna go for a little walk. Get out of these jammies. I'm still in my jammies. The sun is beating down. It's starting to get a bit hot. I'm gonna go change out of my jammies, go for a little walkabout, and yeah, come on back next time for another wonderful chapter. Thank you so much.